Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, it's not really a knife making video at all, making a neck for a guitar. So, a few years back, I made a guitar. Now, being the unreasonable kind of person that I am, I didn't use a kit or a pre-made neck or anything like that. So the neck is by far the most, persnickety, difficult part of an electric guitar to make. So it still probably would have worked out okay, except that I got a slightly warped piece of ebony that I used for the fingerboard. And, I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll just plane it off and everything's going to be fine. Well, didn't work out very well. So I ended up with a guitar with a really crappy neck. After about the 5th fret, it sort of rolled off a little bit. The action was terrible. It's just sat there on my wall for like 15 years now, just sort of exuding sadness and despair. So it's time to get this thing fixed. It's actually a really nice sounding guitar, up to the 5th fret anyway. So pulled it off the wall, gonna remake that neck. I began by stripping the guitar down to parts, labeling everything carefully as I went. Naturally, I couldn't be reasonable and wire this thing normally. I had to make it with coiled taps and out-of-phase switches and no-tone pots and a bunch of non-standard stuff that I frankly couldn't even remember anymore. So I had to label everything in order to have any hope of reconstructing it in functioning order. I also measured all the distances, bridge height, tailstock height, scale length, all that. My theory was to leave as little to chance as possible in putting it back together, since I'd pretty much forgotten how and why I did most of the building and setup on this guitar. So before we go any further, here's the theory of this video. Obviously, I'm a knife maker and I am definitely no guitar builder. So if you want expertise on that subject, it's not here. The point I'm making with this video, and it's one that I've made with tedious regularity in many of my videos, is that there are many ways to skin a cat. So I'm going to be using knife making equipment, basically machine tools, metalworking tools, to accomplish a woodworking project. So, with any manual skill, it's always transferable. Once you learn how to weld, you'll end up welding things that you never thought about. Once you learn how to turn something on a lathe, you'll do things that you never intended to do when you first learned that skill. So that's kind of the general lesson of this video, is that you can take something from one realm, stick it into another place, and do really cool stuff with it. All right, let's jump on back in here. All right, next, time to cut off the offending part. Bye-bye, crap neck. The idea was to save the headstock and replace everything else. Now, real guitar makers at this point would use routers for a lot of the work that I'll do next, but I'm going to be using a milling machine. First, I restored the original 14-degree angle of the neck scarf joint using a 1/2-inch end mill. All I have to do is mill off all the stuff that's not original headstock, and we're back to par. It just goes flat on the mill table, and just take it carefully down to the same level as the back of the headstock. Then I set up the body on the mill's table using a little trigonometry to figure out how to set it up at a 4-degree angle. Milling out the neck pocket using this 4-degree angle will in turn establish a 4-degree offset between the neck and the body. As with routing, the key thing that you'll see with all milling is the setup. Once you've made sure everything's flat and square, you can use the digital readout on the machine to cut everything to dimensions way more precise than woodwork demands. Along the way, I'll also strip off all the lacquer. I did a crap job on the original lacquer, so this gives me an opportunity to redo. Last time I used brushed on marine lacquer or something really stupid and it came out pretty awful. So this time I'll be doing it more or less right using nitrocellulose lacquer. Next, I'll glue up the new neck at the original 14-degree headstock angle. This is potentially a little funky, but it should work out okay. The key is to make sure that it's absolutely square to the new neck. I'll still be using the original position of the nut, so that nut has to be square to the body or the intonation will be off. I'm also gluing on a piece for the heel. Next, we'll fit the heel portion into the pocket that we've already milled into the body. The only tricky part about this is that the face has to fit that 4-degree angle where the body meets the end of the neck. We'll do this on the mill using a procedure very similar to what we did to mill out the pocket. Want to see videos more often on this channel? Better videos? You can help. Consider partnering with the channel by clicking on the link to Patreon. Thanks. Now, back to work. Next, I'll mill out the channel for the truss rod. You can do this with precision undreamed of by woodworkers and their laughable little routers. But seriously, mills are capable of precision overkill when it comes to woodworking. As long as it fits, you're fine. In fact, metalworkers have to be careful about being overly precise, cutting things without sufficient relief to allow the wood to expand and contract. After cutting the frets using my own copy of the LMI fretting jig that I made way back when, I'm ready to glue up the fretboard. Now, any sane person would have bought the LMI jig itself, but hey, that's me, right? Next, I glued up the fretboard. I used MDF pieces on both sides to assure that it glued up nice and flat. After my sad experience with the last neck, I wanted to be ultra careful about flatness here. Next, I carved the neck. Here's another departure from standard operating procedure used by real luthiers. After trimming some excess on my bandsaw, I did the roughing on my knife maker's belt grinder. If you've practiced a lot with a belt grinder, you can do amazingly precise work with it. But since this is not something I do every day, at a certain point I wanted to go back to the hand tools. The place where I especially needed to use hand tools was on the internal radii near the heel and the headstock. Most of the neck assembly here is pretty much the same as any normal luthier would do, so I won't waste your time on that. Radiusing the fretboard, installing the frets, blah blah blah. There are people on YouTube who actually know what they're doing who can show you this. The one other thing I did using metalworking tools is that I drilled the side dots and the fretboard dots on the mill. By using milling cutters known as end mills, which have flat bottoms, I was able to mill these all out very precisely and with nice flat bottoms so that the mother of pearl neck dots fit perfectly and didn't need much sanding in order to get them flush to the fingerboard. If you're a guitar guy and aren't familiar with metalworking tools, you can buy end mills from industrial supply places like MSC. Though they're really made for mills, they can be used in drill presses and are great for cutting flat-bottomed holes. Once everything was glued up, I lacquered everything with clear nitrocellulose lacquer. After lacquering, here's how it came out, accompanied by a sampling of the kind of sounds I'm able to get out of it. Everything here is played through a Mesa Boogie Mark II combo serial number around 1000 that I bought back in 1981, I believe. No effects other than reverb. So, not too bad. General lesson, the more skills you pick up, the more cool stuff you can make. So, if you learn enough stuff, man, the sky's the limit. Hey guys, if you found value in this video, I hope you'll consider partnering with the channel to help us bring more videos, better videos, more knives, more techniques, all that cool stuff. Click the link to Patreon to help this channel. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, bro, what are you waiting on? And check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Also, if you're into Japanese swords, check out my website, waltersorrellsblades.com, where you'll see more of my work and where you'll find videos about the making of Japanese swords, along with mounting, fittings, polishing, hamones, all kinds of good stuff. Now, more videos.